Welcome, people. Today on the Creative Lens, we're going to be talking about creative thinking versus systematic thinking. So the yin and the yang way, that's what we're going to be digging into today. So
very kung fu.
Yeah, I didn't mean it to be.
Well, no, it works.
Well, I guess the thing is, it's one thing. I find it's something I jump between a lot on creative projects, Wade, is because there's the creative headspace, which we'll get into that in a second. But also there's like when you're wanting to undertake something creatively, you can't ignore the logistical side of things, because in order for that thing to move forward, which I know in my own personal experience, making music, you have to write the music and then you have to get it produced, book studio time, record it, mix it. Like there's all these little steps that need to be logistically taken care of. Like maybe you need to hire certain musicians, hire a string section or whatnot. So it's being able to balance those two, and because you can't always work when inspiration hits you like a lightning bolt, because otherwise you might be one of those people that hits once every 6 months.
Exactly, yeah. Because I mean, if you look at the act of being creative, you can, like, creativity being the ideas, being the I want to do this thing, create this, the expression, the ability to put that down on, paint to canvas, put it down, like everything requires a skill which has some kind of systematic element to it. And then the next level of that, even the really interesting creators out there are being creative with the system, where they're going, hey, there's a thing here where if we use a system in a way that's not intentional, you can create something a little unique. So literally, yeah, they are polar opposites, but they nearly always come together. You've heard the term creative accounting, right?
Yeah, mate, I couldn't think of anything more boring than accounting.
Yeah, unless it saves you a lot of money. Ooh, creative.
Oh yeah, but like it just seems like, I don't know look, I don't want to go down that path.
I wasn't suggesting we talk about it.
I just like the accountants, like they're lovely people. Yeah. Okay, but moving forward, so for example, when you're in a creative headspace, Wade, like what are your experiences in that creative headspace versus the logistical or systematic headspace?
I definitely find it's a bit of a seesaw. Like there'll be one concept or idea that just pops into my head. And on top of that, it also is founded in some kind of systematic knowledge or background, obviously. But being able to find, I think we've discussed in the past, the idea of contrast, like, a silly dog in a serious setting type thing. But to me, that's a systematic thought of having the two polar opposites. But yeah, I will get an idea for a concept or something, and then I think, cool, how would I make that possible? And that's when you have to sort of go step back, place the elements on, and be systematic about what works to place those elements on there, and then kind of take a review. It's kind of like you lay one thing down by being systematic. You take a step back and look at it, get some creative ideas, and then you have to be systematic to lay down the next layer. And that's kind of like a process of seesawing from one to the other to build a creative concept or something visual, especially because I'm more visual with my art style. I find, it's like a nice seesawing process of create, implement.
That's actually really interesting, and I've never heard it put that way. Is because it's not black or white, is it? It's like, now I'm being creative, now I'm being a project manager, now I'm being creative, now I'm being a project manager. And that was very interesting how you said it, particularly in the creative process. There's you can constantly switch back and forward to go to something systematic, because I think where systems help people is they give people a frame. If you think about it from a purely engineering perspective, it gives people a roadmap or a pathway to move forward with something. Okay, so I'm at this point here and I want to get to this outcome. What steps are going to allow me to hit a certain outcome? But creative, when you're in that flow of creative thinking, sometimes something will just whoomp, and you just have to follow that idea or follow that urge to sit down and do something. Have you ever had the experience where you just feel like you got to sit down in front of a computer or start making something? Like visual art for you, but I've had the experience with music. You just sit down, like, something's coming. I gotta get this out.
Yeah, definitely. I've done the amount of times I've just had an idea and I'm like, I need to create that because it's in my head, and I think I would just like to see it, but I want to see it the way I want to see it, and I don't know what it looks like yet, and I need to create it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I think that's the thing is creativity, you don't know what the lifespan of a creative surge is. And you cannot just sit around and wait for inspiration. Like, I'm a big believer, if you want to create consistently, you have to almost sit down and be quite systematic about sitting down to create your work, just because I think that makes you better at being creative. So when inspiration does strike, you've had enough repetitions on knowing how to handle an idea. I think that's a little personal philosophy of mine, which I got out of the book, The War of Art by Stephen Pressfield. Let me just Google that one for a sec, man.
Once again, I'm going to sing while Ryan brings this up, unless he manages to cut me off before I start.
I gotcha.
Oh, God damn it.
Man, you're giving me like, oh no. Hang on. This is making a great podcast. Author is Pressfield. Sorry about, man. People are just like, thanks for that, mate. Yeah, so his concept is like the artist or the pro goes to work. Like, for example, you want to write a movie, like you sit down 10 o'clock every day and write for 3 hours. Or you want to write a book, 10 o'clock you sit down and, channel the inspiration to find you. I think that's good. I don't disagree with that. Like, but don't expect every day to be this whirlwind, like adventure where like Dorothy and the Wizard of Oz, man. Like, you gotta sit down and do the work. But I love that idea, man, where you're just jumping back and forward, like, because you get that lifespan of inspiration, that surge, and then you can jump to the other side and go, okay, cool. I've got this idea here. Where could I go with this, and maybe think about it a little bit more systematically?
Yeah, exactly. Well, the creative surge really is a gift, isn't it? It's something you can't rely on it receiving all the time. But yeah, I like the idea of being systematic to give yourself like some ideas. Oh, you've got to be kidding me.
What's that?
All right, can we just wait a moment?
Yeah, man. But I think like just on that idea where like you're talking about where it's a gift, I think Rick Rubin, the record producer, I love his idea about it, where it's you have to have your antenna up. So he's just going about, so you have to get out there, make your work, and then you just keep that antenna up of, keeping your eyes and ears open for those ideas, because as an artist, that's all you can do. You can sit down and wait for inspiration or the ideas to come through you, because I don't think we actually sit down and make things out of ourselves. Like, we're involved in the world and in culture and the environment, and these ideas come through us as opposed to coming from within us, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I think that it's absolutely, and having your own way of sort of getting, because you need to establish your own way to get that kind of creative surge, because like I said, when you just receive it, it's just being received. But I actually like the idea of having the system around it. Like, one thing I find is just being able to go, all right, maybe I just go and consume some content, and I know systematically where to go to find that. And I'll see something I like, but I want to put my own spin on it. And that's a nice, easy way of doing it. Another thing I like doing too is looking at a system of something, identifying the limitations, and you go, cool, well, those limitations would suggest doing things this way, but how can I creatively work around those limitations within them still to create something unique? Like, finding little ways to get that inspiration, I think, is a big, big difference.
Yeah, that change of scenery that, like you're talking about, going from being, because I know what I'm about to talk about is where you say, like, I just need to find some more input from somewhere else. Like, I've noticed that with guitar players, like a lot of people spend sometimes too much time practicing and not enough time listening to other music, just because I think art is a very instinctual thing, and you can get too caught up in developing this one little thing all the time, where you can hear someone else do something and it just moves you a certain way, and you want to, what if I do that with my playing or my soloing or a melody like this and phrase it like that? All these little things, and it's having that input, and that's where like the inspiration is the environment coming in and like catching your attention one way or the other.
Yeah, exactly. And that's where even you're systematically setting that up to creatively identify things. And sometimes it's not something you go, I'm looking for something, but being able to kind of switch off and just let it happen. And when something strikes you, it kind of, the other thing too is is taking that a step further is obviously there's the skills involved in the creative thing, whether it's painting or playing the guitar and getting used to moving that way. But also, like if you're a musician, understanding how to market a gig and things like that, or any kind of business where you're selling something creative, like obviously that's the professional side of creativity. You need to have some system behind accounting or how to run a business, but focusing purely on creativity itself, the actual skill of creativity, so your ideas becoming unique is something that can be a skill because you systemize how you come up with those ideas or the areas of life you explore, and you deliberately get into the habit of having an open mind about it. And then you literally have to be deliberate and skillful about how you implement the idea. Otherwise, having creativity will just exist in your mind, but then when you go to actually deliver and express it, it's just going to be something you can't actually communicate, isn't it?
Well, I guess, yeah, well, again, you can't control, like, I think the good thing about these days, Wade, is there's so many avenues to put out work that, like, then you can, like, it's a big ocean of people doing it, but you can put your work out there, and if it resonates with enough people and you do it consistently, you can build an audience. As opposed to back in the days, like, creative industries usually had gatekeepers, whether in the forms of like record companies or, I'm not saying it's good or bad. They're just two different systems. I think at the end of the day, like for me, like I've made music for myself that I haven't even tried to promote. I've actually spent money, thousands of dollars in just making music just because I love doing it. Like I have no intention of promoting it. It's just music I made.
Yeah.
And I do it for the process of doing it. Like just in those instances where I've done that. So man, I think that's, if something, it comes down to whether something moves you enough to want to follow that idea and try and actualize it.
What's cool about that too, you're talking about how these days the systems that are in place, which are literally algorithms, platforms, and things on the internet, they give you the option to express yourself to the world, and you can go back and watch it anytime, review it anytime. If it doesn't go anywhere, that's cool, because if you've enjoyed the process, it doesn't matter. But also, they give your art a chance to get up and walk and meet people through these algorithms and things like that. And that's a really cool thing, because then you don't have to kind of like pander to people. You can just do the thing you want to do, and it doesn't matter if it doesn't reach people, but it might as well. And then on top of that, if you look at AI, if you're not a skilled person, you can now just go, well, here are my ideas, and throw it at a system that will kind of try to combine them. And then you can tweak that. So the creative mind is more able to express itself now than ever. I agree.
Yeah. And I think the thing is, if you're doing something of value, that someone perceives as being valuable, then it will find it, like, it will find its way, and you do it consistently enough, it will find its way out there. Like, it's pretty hard to ignore excellence.
I agree.
You can't, like, if something is that good.
Yeah. Also, I also don't want to ignore your message too, that like, it doesn't necessarily have to be for other people. If being creative helps you as a person, like it's something that just makes your life better, makes you happy, like that is the ultimate.
Oh no,
like, why else do it?
When I said that, or what I mean by what I said is, like, don't necessarily just make art and not show anybody. You should try and show people your art. But I was in the position where I literally had no time to even put a thought into promoting what I was doing. Like, just no time. And I couldn't be like, because I just had that much on. I'm just like, but I want to do this. Because if I don't do it now, like, now is the time to do this project if I'm going to do it. Otherwise, it just, the moment passes. Because I do think creative ideas have a lifespan.
Especially when there's excitement behind them, because that excitement, you might hold on to a concept for years, but then if you don't act when you're excited, for one, you can lose the concept, but if you don't act when you're excited, you might look back and, I not really want to create that.
You can't recreate the magic, man. When it's like, you got to know what time it is. And when it's go time, you got to go. Like, you have to trust your instincts. When it's go time, you got to go, because I've just done this enough, man. I've been doing it long enough to know that you get a really good idea and you're like, I'll just put that in my phone. I'll come back to it. Never come back to it. Never happens. Like, inspiration has a lifespan, or maybe it might just catch you one day, but put it aside. But when you get that feeling like, it's go time, I got to do this, like, you got to follow that.
Yep, definitely. And you will do your best work during that time easily. Especially because you'll hit that flow state as well.
Yes, that's exactly what I was going to say.
Yeah, oh man, beat you to it. Yeah. Which is funny. And to be kind of like, that's when I feel like creativity and systematic thinking just sort of come together at the same time. And it's like, I know this isn't scientifically correct, but it's almost like both sides of your brain just start working at the one time.
When has that ever stopped anyone, Wade?
Oh, yes. Well, 50% of all people know that, right?
There's not enough people like making Simpsons, because like we're at that age now where like Simpsons quotes are just like, people don't get, like, unless you watch The Simpsons, like, which is obviously makes perfect sense, that how would you get a quote for something? But you see kids growing up these days and you make a Simpsons joke and it's just like,
yeah, you never reach kids that way.
Yeah. This is like, I love my wife, man. We're very happily married, but The Simpsons, where she grew up, it was in Spanish. So like my jokes, she doesn't get my Simpsons jokes, man, because like they're in Spanish. Like, so it's like, yeah. Anyway, that's
my wife is English speaking first. She wasn't allowed to watch The Simpsons, so she looks at me like, "What?"
Yeah,
confused. It's a dark house I live in. You know.
Yeah, that's life is full of regrets, son, as they say.
Yeah, that's. Oh, but anyway, like if you look at that year in the 90s, anyone growing up in the 90s. They watched The Simpsons and it was literally like the most foremost part of media, and it shaped a lot of creativity because you would talk in those lingos. I still watch some people now who will just throw Simpsons quotes into their commentary on stuff.
I swear I've thrown like 3 or 4 at you today, man, whilst we've been talking. Like maybe not in this episode, but just when we were chatting before on air before we're recording.
Yeah.
Listen to me. We've got a radio station now, Wade. Jesus.
Yeah.
On air. 93 point. Yeah. So it's interesting, all that stuff. But yeah, it's massive cultural influence.
Yeah. And that's the thing too. Culture influences creativity. It's not just The Simpsons. If you go deep on something cultural, like, you know, the amount, like, I can't think of anything specific, but like, even heavy metal music, you go deep and you find a real obscure band, there could be something about that sound that entices you to create something even sounds completely different, but maybe conceptually the same. You go, I can see what they're doing with the rhythm in their music, and go, but I'm a jazz player. I'd love to see that in jazz. Yeah. And that's the same thing.
This is one of my airy fairy philosophies on that, is there's certain art that I think culture, that what you're talking about actually, like for example, would the Beatles be the Beatles if they came out in the 90s? And you can't answer this. Like, would Nirvana be Nirvana if they came out in the 70s?
Yeah. Well,
the thing is, but if you look at those a little bit more like deeply, those things couldn't have happened in any other time because of the cultural, the influence and the mixing of just all these different elements that we call culture.
It's what the world was ready to receive at the time, wasn't it? It's like, and I guess I'm just saying this for fun at this stage, but I think when we were in late high school, nu metal was a thing, like the thing. Nu metal was the popular genre of music. Could you imagine the Beatles, nu metal band? That's the only way they would have been successful during that time.
I think they were too. I don't know. I don't want to say. I can't imagine George Harrison, man, like as an angry young man.
No,
he just seems too chill. Like could you imagine Ringo Starr, like peace and love, and he's like
peace and love and death.
Yeah, like with his hat backwards, like trying to start a riot at Woodstock. Like that just sounds like someone's taken too many drugs, man.
Yeah, exactly. You're right. And so those people were alive at the right time. It's like, as a martial arts actor, Scott Adkins, and he's amazing, the stuff he does. And if he was born 20 years earlier and was doing this stuff in the 80s, because the stuff he was studying was around back then, more or less, But I mean, obviously, there's some cultural influences from people like Van Damme, Bruce Lee, and all that kind of stuff. But imagine that dude, if he was born 20 years earlier, found his way into a martial arts gym, he would have been like a Van Damme. He would have been, but now he's just not that because he wasn't born at the right time.
Yeah. Well, it's just, mate,
he's still huge, obviously, in the martial arts circle.
But he's doing his thing, man, and you can't control, I guess, the impact. But he obviously followed what he was interested in. And I'm sure he's living a pretty good life and made a good career out of what he's doing.
Yeah.
Before we close up, Wade, I think we should end today's episode on this. Is Van Damme actually legit? Like, what is it? Is he like a kickboxer or? Like,
yeah, I would say yes and no, and I'll explain why. This is it. I think he is legit for the style. Like he did, I can't remember what style karate he did, but he did karate. Okay. He entered tournaments. He's a legit martial artist.
Right.
I wouldn't ever put him on a world championship level. I would have to investigate more, but especially nowadays when you've got so many of the, I would say, more effective systems in combat sports rising to the top. Things like Muay Thai, boxing. Boxing was always a main combat sport, but like, I don't know if he would be able to compete in combat sports today as we know it, as kickboxing, MMA, that kind of thing. And that's what a lot of culturally nowadays people use as a measuring stick.
Yep.
So I would say he's a legit martial artist, 100%. I would say he's a legit martial arts performer. He's excellent as a martial arts performer, but as a fighter, I would say he's probably not the best fighter around by today's standards. He would be not legit.
But things existed in their own little ecosystems back then. Like, because he was like 80s, was he? 80s and 90s?
80s, yeah. Well, even look at Chuck Norris. Like, everyone talks about Chuck. He is a legit martial artist.
Was he a karate guy too?
Yeah, but, and here's the thing, like, let's say take Bruce Lee and Chuck Norris. A lot of people will compare Bruce Lee to Chuck Norris. Say, well, Chuck Norris is a fighter. Bruce Lee wasn't. But
did Chuck Norris actually have fights, man?
Yeah. And I'm not trying to get down a rabbit hole or something completely unrelated, but this is an example.
We're in that rabbit hole.
We're in the rabbit hole. So Bruce Lee, he fought in a lot of street fights against other skilled martial artists where it was bare knuckle, people actually trying to hurt each other. But Chuck Norris gets the credit because he fought in competition, but he fought in point contact karate. And I'm not saying that people got hurt in point contact karate, but the environment is not conducive to a real fight. And you've got another guy, Joe Louis, point contact karate fighter. You could say the same thing, except he transitioned to full contact kickboxing, and became one of the best full contact kickboxers of all time. So now I've gone across the spectrum. I've kind of nerded out a little bit on that. But you're talking about Chuck Norris has this awesome reputation because he's done so many martial arts styles and he is legitimized. But it can be very easy to look one way or the other based on the time. People say he was a professional fighter because he was, but as a point karate professional fighter, you can't say the same thing and compare him to an MMA fighter on that example. And whereas Van Damme, he did do full contact karate competitions, but yeah, he wouldn't compare against MMA fighters of today. It's just really, it's a really nuanced conversation, I think.
Well, MMA's like, it's a different beast today than what it was when it started back in the early 90s, man. Like, you could, like, back in the day, it was just a bunch of people who were specialists in their field trying to make it work. Like you can't just be a straight jiu-jitsu guy and go into an MMA tournament now and win it. Like, or you're not going to be a world champion in the UFC just doing jiu-jitsu. It's not going to happen.
So let's bring that back to creativity now, just as a way of finalizing that.
All right.
So taking the martial arts, right? We've got these guys in the UFC. It was a style versus style affair where you had a boxer come in, a kickboxer come in, a shooter guy, a jiu-jitsu guy to see which style was the best. But the guys who thought creatively then went, well, okay, what if I can strike and stand up? And we've all heard this. But then there were guys who did try other things. Like there's guys who did like foot stomps and guys who tried to bring in other tactics that did or didn't work. And what rose to the surface was the main styles like jiu-jitsu, wrestling, boxing, Muay Thai. And eventually karate guys found a way to make it work, thinking creatively about how you can put the skills together to create a system you can use in the ring. It was exactly that brought MMA to where it is now. And then the rules also put enough limitations on it to create kind of like some brackets to work within. And yeah, I think that's a nice little kind of roundabout thing.
Well, I think that's it's like being creative. Like, this is effective from here, this is good from there, like, and then you're mixing it together to make something new. So yeah, being creative.
100%.
With violence. All right, so we should probably wrap that one up there, man. On
The
that
MMA / creativity channel.
yeah. Like, all right. Anyway, I don't know whether, a lot of artistic, that's the thing. How many artistic people are actually interested in that sort of stuff? I don't know.
I would like to say, before we wrap up, if you got this far and you like the MMA discussion, and just leave a comment. I'm not promising anything. We may talk more about martial arts. I don't know. But depending on what comments come through, we'll just read them and, we'll just see what happens from there, because
we'll go from
Ryan
there.
and I both practice jiu-jitsu. We've both been doing martial arts. So, yeah.
See what happens.
Let us know.
See what happens. All right, dude. Wade, where can the good people find you?
So just searching for Creator Impact on all the socials, YouTube, websites, creatorimpact.com. And you can find me and my bits and pieces there. What about you, Ryan?
You can find my YouTube channel at HPM Guitar, where all my lessons and content is on there. And also you can find the website, which has more premium stuff available there, which is www.hpmguitar.com. Thank you very much.
In the description too, guys.
Cool, man. Sound good. That's how you plug. So thanks very much for listening, people. Get in touch if you want to leave any questions, and we'll catch you on the next episode.
Peace. See you next time.